Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the October 9th, 2017 Board of Education. Could we have a roll call, please?
Baum.
Here.
Laude.
Here.
Livingston.
Here.
Mansell. Here. Smith.
Here.
Carson.
Here.
Salvatore.
Here. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the September 11, 2017 meeting. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Baum.
Yes.
Laude.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
Mansell.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Carson.
Yes.
Salvatore.
Yes, thank you. So the next item is written communication. Do we have any written communication, Dr. Davis?
We have no written communication at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, information items. The first item we have is a report on advanced placement.
And that will be Dr. Bavis.
Okay. And I am joined by Mr. Dale Liebforth and Ms. Tina Lula. Thank you. Come on in and join me at the table.
Q.
I could hear.
Do you like that cue?
I could hear my name in the background.
Well, once again, Evanston Township High School has received independent, continues to receive independent national recognition for its advanced placement program. This slide is familiar to a lot of folks. We can also add Phi Delta Kappan to that list. There it is. What is an AP score? There are 5 possible AP scores. Levels 1 and 2. 2 is a possibly qualified. And scores of 3 or higher, the College Board deems those qualified, well qualified, and extremely well qualified. There's a unique value to a score of a 3+ in Illinois. Public universities and community colleges in Illinois are required by law to award college course credit for AP scores of 3 or higher. That's distinguished from placement. You're not just being placed into an additional course, you actually receive course credit for any course you receive a 3 or higher in. It's transcripted credit now in Illinois at public universities and community colleges. Well, we did it again. For the 4th consecutive year, ETHS has more scores of 3 or higher on AP exams than we did total exams in 2010. This is my requisite slide. How did we do? Well, we had 1,450 AP test scores of 3 or higher in 2017, compared to 1,384 total tests administered in 2010. In 2010, we gave 1,384 tests. Last year, we had 1,450 scores of 3 or higher. It's just an incredible pace. 66, we saw a 66% increase in scores of 3 or higher if we go back to 06, 07. We go back to 06, 07 throughout the report because it predates our AP work and provides a look at where we were in the recent past. Nationally, I updated this slide. The reference is now 2016. It was 2013. This is according to the AP report to the nation. Nationally, 20% of high school graduates earned a 3 or higher on at least one AP exam. At ETHS, 46% of all seniors, when I say all seniors, I mean every senior that we had last year, whether they took AP or not, 46% of them got a 3 or higher. That's out of the entire senior class. Our access is up 120% since 06, 07. Our scores of 3 or higher are up 66%. Each subgroup has made gains, but access and success gaps persist. There's the graph of total number of exams taken from 06, 07 to 2016, 17. You see that we administered 2,335 exams last year. And you'll see there that we had a 66% increase in the number of scores of 3 or higher. And we saw over that time period a 41% increase in scores of 4 or higher. Oftentimes people say, where's the real growth? Is it in the 3s or is it in the 4s or higher? And we saw a 41% increase. We had 891 scores of 4 or higher on AP exams last year. We had 559 scores of 3. And this is the all slide, and this is one of the things we really keep track of. We look at all of the students that were in 11th and 12th grade. That's our denominator. And our numerator is the number of students who took an AP exam. So you'll see that overall 64% of all 11th and 12th graders took an AP course. And you see that if we go back in this case to 11-12, you see that it was 38% when we started the work. You'll see white students have gone from 59% to 87%. African American students have gone from 23% to 36%, and Latino students from 17% to 43%. These are our access numbers. The total, we take the total number of students taking AP exams, divide them by the total number of students in 11th and 12th grade. 44% of all 11th and 12th graders earned a 3 or higher on 1 or more AP exams. There you see it reported out by subgroup. And we actually, when we talk about individual students, we look at total AP students, and we look at AP students who scored. We always talk about how important getting individual students across, to take an AP course, but then also to score a 3 or higher on the exam. Last year we had 988 different students take an AP test, and we had 685 unique students score a 3 or higher. 685 students at ETHS scored a 3 or higher last year. Those are unique students. That's an all-time high. When we talk about black African American students, we see 159 students, ties an all-time, our all-time high for access, and we see 65 students receiving scores of 3 or higher. So again, if you go back to as recently as 2011-12, we had 34 students, black students, earning a score of 3 or higher, and we are up to 65. So we're making progress.
And Pete, I know this won't be a precise number, but a ballpark, and how many black African-American students would have been in AP in 2006 and 7?
Oh, you're talking about fewer than 40 probably. And you're talking about 15 to 18 earning a 3 or higher. Latino numbers, you see we had 119 Latino students take AP courses last year. And again, we have a high mark of 77 unique students scoring a 3 or higher. If you go back to 11-12, it's 51, and if we were to go back even further, the further back you go, the lower that number gets. So we've made progress over time, and we continue to see growth. And here are our white students. We went from 519 total AP students in 11-12 to 617 in 16-17. And in terms of unique students getting a 3 or higher, we were up to 483 last year. Again, all the subgroups reported out have hit their highest total of unique students getting a 3 or higher. So where's the growth come from? Well, we have 10 courses that account for 75% of the tests. These are our access leaders. You'll see this is a very familiar slide for folks who've looked at this data before and seen this presentation. AP Language and Comp, AB Calculus, and Psychology continue to be the top 3. You'll see that in between AB and English Language and Comp, we have over 500 students enrolled in those courses, which is pretty amazing. Our top 10 courses for success account for 68% of our scores of 3 or higher. These are the courses we pay particular attention to because of the volume of students. You'll see again English Language and Comp, 209 scores of 3 or higher. AP Psychology, 161 students, AB Calc, 139. In the report, I talked a little bit about the work we did in AB Calculus last year. We really focused on moving students from a score of 1 to a 2 and 2 to a 3 because we saw a preponderance of kids getting scores of 1 in AB Calculus, and we were able to reduce that number significantly and get more kids across the 3 threshold. These are College Board honors. They designate students as AP Scholars with Honor, AP Scholars with Distinction, and so on. This is a metric I report on every year, but I don't spend too much time on it. It really, these awards are bestowed on students who take 3 or more AP courses and so on as you progress through the ranks and score 3 or higher or 4 or higher on exams. For more information on that, you can go to the College Board website. Again, these are for students who take quite a few AP tests and score very, very well. And it progresses from AP Scholar all the way up to National AP Scholar and AP International Diploma. Last year, you'll notice we had 350 students recognized as part of this program, total scholars. One of the things we do, I meet with department chairs and review AP scores and AP trends. We go over quite a bit of data. We choose 3 focus areas. We're going to continue to do that this year as well as last, and we're hoping to see growth in some targeted areas. Last year we saw growth not only in AP Psych, but we also saw growth in Calculus, and we are looking to, we saw growth in biology and in chemistry. Tina Lula is here. She was one of our chemistry teachers who really put a focus on getting students not just enrolled in AP, but seeing them through with a great level of success. And we're going to continue to focus on these areas because these are very, very important. One of the things we do know nationally is that there is a need to really drill down, not just at high school, but to really look at students well before they get to high school, looking into the elementary and middle schools. You know, I know that it was interesting. I was meeting with Tina and Dale the other day, and Tina said, "Oh yeah, I came across that in doing some research on AP Access and how important really awareness at an early age is, and persistence in science into the college level really starts very early. It starts in elementary and middle school." We'll hear a little bit about that in a second. I'm going to turn it over to Dale and Tina to talk through Team ASAP and the work that Team ASAP has done last year and into this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Dale Leapforth, AP Success Manager. Tina and I were checking just to make sure the Cubs won, and it was 2-1. They did win the game, so there you go, in case you missed it. But I want to talk briefly about you know, some of the AP supports we're doing. Obviously, we look at the data, and it's impressive data, but when you dig deeper, there are some areas that we need to continue to focus on. So it was very valuable last year when Dr. Bevis took us in as department chairs, also the math department chair. We really zeroed in on areas that we needed to target. You know, for me, AB Calc was one, statistics was another, and how can we continue to see our success numbers continue to grow along with the access. This is a slide that I haven't brought to the board before, but you've seen different pieces of this. We've tried to create a communication structure around all the events and supports that we have. What you're seeing in front of you is basically the year before you ever sign up for an AP class, all the supports we have in place. I won't go to each one of those in detail at this point. And then the bottom row is what you would have as a support, a beginning level of support during your AP school year. So before you even enter into a class, I would say a few years back, you show up on day one, in August and September, welcome to the class. At this point, from December of this year, we'll start to prepare students for next year's AP classes. So it's really helping to support them all the way up to and through their AP classes. And so you can see that graphic there. One of the things that we also want to start to do is reach down to the earlier grades. As Pete had mentioned, there's a lot of research connected to, finding out about some of these opportunities. You talk about the awareness piece and creating access for students. We were able to present at an Institute Day at District 65, and from that, a group from Lincolnwood Elementary School, my former elementary school here in Evanston, shout out to Lincolnwood, invited us for the 4th and 5th graders, I can't explain how amazing it was of an opportunity to have our students, which you see on stage there, sharing their stories of success, of struggles with the students at Lincolnwood. I remember my highlight of the day was when I said, "Who wants to be a mathematician when they grew up?" And I would say about 3/4 of the auditorium raised their hand excitedly, so it's good to see. They said the same for science and other things. So it was great to see the excitement around learning around academics that was able to be sparked while we were there at the visit. We broke out, and I think we probably could have stayed there for hours answering the questions that the students had. The point is, here's where you could end up. We have "Follow Me" on the back of our shirts, and so the students were really there to set an example, to really set the stage to start these students on the pathway towards success from an early age. And we plan to continue and maybe even have kind of a Team ASAP feeder at some of these schools as we start to look at, targeting individuals and groups, at the earlier ages. I mentioned the Institute Day we presented at Chute Middle School. Here's some pictures from that. We were able to reach elementary, middle school faculty and staff from District 65, and really we want to continue to partner with District 65 because we don't want to just see them on day one and start to give them the information, the tools, the steps towards success. We want to reach down and do that as early as possible. Our next event is the Pathways to AP Forum. You can see Dr. Bavis sitting there. He was our moderator this past year, so we'll do that again, and that's kind of our opening for the next year where we say, hey, here's what we're all about as an AP program, and we want to welcome you and set you up for success. Team ASAP has also continued partnerships this year. Some of the ones that I wanted to highlight, we partnered with an Emerge program, a brand new program called MAP, and this is for students of color. They were rising seniors, but now they are seniors in AP English, and they're mentoring juniors in AP Lang and Comp. Lang and Comp is one of, I think it's our most popular course, and that's an entry-level course for our juniors. Many of them take English, and that's their first AP, often along with APUSH. And we, students really drove this program as a way to help students be mentored along their pathway through that first AP course by students who had been there, with a focus on students of color. We also are continuing to partner with the peer tutoring program. We just trained 75 tutors. We have some of our Team ASAP students will be tutors, and some of them will be tuteed, but this is a very special program in that it's run, by students for students, really to help their peers be successful. We're continuing to work to get our teachers, our AP teachers, AVID trained so they can share language that's used for students that we're supporting. And we also have continued our connection and outreach with MSAN, the Minority Student Achievement Network, where we're sharing best practices and partnering with other schools who are doing similar, programs and supports with their students. And now it's my pleasure to turn over to Tina Lula, who is helping us with our Team ASAP program.
Awesome, thanks. So again, my name is Tina Lula. This is my 3rd year here at ETHS, and I'm excited to join Pete and Dale with Team ASAP. So I know that they have mentioned Team ASAP many times, but just in case you aren't familiar, Team ASAP stands for Team Access and Success in Advanced Placement. The purpose of the team is really to create a community for AP students with a specific emphasis on creating for all students a sense of belonging in an AP setting. One of the initiatives, of course, that I'm excited to share that Pete highlighted is the work we've done with AP Chemistry. So over the last 3 years, the class has expanded from 1 section to 4 sections, implying that there's quite a bit of change in the access to the course. And we've achieved that by breaking down the barriers for the students. So students from both regular chemistry as well as honors chemistry are being made aware of the opportunity to take AP Chemistry. They're being adequately prepared in their sophomore or junior year class for the course. And then as they head into the course, we have a bunch of supports, primarily the ones through Team ASAP that that Dale highlighted, to ensure that they are reminded of the access they have to the class, and then once they enroll, that they can be successful in the class. So obviously, I'm really excited about that, since that's one of the courses I teach, but joining the team myself, I'm excited to kind of expand that across all of the other AP courses that we have here at the school. So with that, I think we're ready to roll over to questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Really good information, exciting to hear. I love to see the growth and the numbers increase from year to year, and particularly when we look at the numbers as early as 2006 and just see how far we've come. So it's pretty amazing. So board, I open it up. Anybody? Jonathan?
Well, actually, as glowing as that report was, I think you understated what we have achieved in the last few years. And the reason I say that is a lot of these numbers where you have the absolute numbers and they're not percentages, it doesn't have the same impact. So I was actually fiddling with some of the numbers and figuring out some percentages. And this is one that really, I think, is an important message to get out. If you look at black students, in 2011, 2012, 23% had taken an AP course. In 2016-17, 36% had taken an AP course. And at the same time, of those 23% who took an AP course in 2011-2012, 34% got a 3 or higher. But of the 36% who took one in 2016-17, 41% got a 3 or higher. And I think that those are really dramatic numbers. So, you know, that I think what we're showing is that there isn't a trade-off between access and success. And I think a lot of people said, oh, if you make it so accessible, you know, you will diminish success. And I think that those numbers are really very impressive, and I just wanted to make sure they got out there in that way.
Well put.
I had two questions. One is about, if you look at the access, the percentage of grade 11, 12 students taking one or more exam, and you look at the last 3 years, it's pretty stable. Mm-hmm. That is, there's a kind of plateauing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe that's the right place to be. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it was interesting because last year we talked about this a little bit when we did the report, and this year we're seeing the new normal, right? And an adjustment to the new normal. I think what we really need to really double down on is what we do with the students when they're in the classes, right? We want to be very clear about supporting students we talk about to and through college, but we want to support kids to and through AP courses. And you know, our access numbers, you know, could be flattening out percentage-wise, but I think our success numbers could go up, and I think that comes with time. And as you said, we've shown growth in those areas, but I think that's an area ripe for support.
I would also say, I mean, that's an access number. So last year, Beth Ari and I actually sat down, looked at the students who had never taken an AP class, student by student, you know, very granular. A number of those students, actually, all of the students that we looked at that weren't in that grouping have yet to earn honors credit or take an honors class. So we dug in pretty deeply. And I think as we talk about AP, obviously it's a broader conversation than that. How do we stretch more students to be successful in their regular class, to earn honors credit, to, you know, do well in their honors class? So I plan to, again, look at those numbers to see who are those students that aren't in this data, and how can we continue to stretch them and help them to be successful. AP's an answer to that. There's also other places where we found that we can stretch them towards success. Sometimes in math, it was our dual credit offerings from Oakton. You know, in other areas, there was other places. Some of our engineering programs, students were being really successful. They didn't fall under the AP specific category. So I think, you know, I plan to look at those numbers again to see who those actual students are.
I also think that what we could do in the future is to broaden the scope of this report to include those. I think the board would really probably appreciate an update on our dual credit, on our Pathways to College courses that we implemented last year. And I also think it's time to shine the light on our Project Lead the Way and our certification programs. And that could be under this umbrella as a reporting.
And I want to add to Mr. Baum's question. I don't think we've topped out yet. I think the real areas yet for opportunity are with our kids of color. And I am convinced, as I see everything that's underway and what we've been able to figure out and do so far, I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to be able to still see those numbers. I agree, looks a little flat right now, although certainly every trajectory is going to what I call the right direction. But I think there's more opportunity there,
Okay, I hope so.
Particularly with our kids of color.
I had one little granular question left, which is U.S. government AP, which had 31% of exam scores of 3 or higher. And as I understand it, we teach this over the course of a year, right?
Yeah.
And in most schools, it's taught in a semester.
Compressed,
right?
yep.
So I would think that if we stretched it out over a year, we would be doing better. And
I would. So one of the things I've looked at, I'm glad you asked that. One of the things we've looked at, there was a summer project this year on AP government, which kind of looked at, hey, let's look at, this screams alignment. It screams alignment curricularly, it screams alignment, a need for a recalibration to what's being asked on the AP exam, how questions are being asked, what we're asking kids to know and be able to do in the classroom. And we've made strides already in terms of changing that instructional delivery. So, yes, although, you never know. Maybe if it was compressed, there'd be more of a sense of urgency. Who knows?
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to comment, and it's exactly to Dr. Witherspoon's point. The graph, when we look at this graph that shows access, for example, because of the scale of it and the way it lays out, it's a little misleading. It looks like that gap between black or African-American students and white students, for example, back in 2006 to 2007 is about the same gap as it is in 2016-17, just because of the distance on the paper or on the screen here. But in reality, in 06-07, about the number of black students, the percentage of black students that had access was only about 12% of the percentage of white students that had access. In 16-17, it was 41%. So that's a significant closing of that
Huge.
gap.
Yes.
But the fact is, it's still only 41%, so there's still a significant opportunity there to close that. And, I was looking at Jonathan's point, I was looking at the same thing. It's like, well, I wonder, is this just, have we maxed out? Have we reached that saturation point? Maybe we have with some of the students. But I think that the fact that there's still this stratification by subgroup shows that we haven't maxed out on everybody. So, yeah, the work goes on.
Jude, turn your mic on.
The growth is exceptional, and I applaud you guys for the hard work that I know it must take to get these kind of numbers and to see the growth. And access is great. I like the fact that you all are going to the lower levels and making families and students aware of the opportunity. What I am interested in seeing is the percentage of students who enroll in AP that end up failing those courses. And then furthermore, never take AP again because of that first experience. So I'm seeing with the calculus, I'm just curious to know what types of interventions at the classroom level, because the effort was made, and that was a target area, that calculus, to bring the 1s up to 3s. So I'm wondering what types of interventions were made to improve those outcomes, and are they similar to the ones that are being put in place for students who end up having to, they fail the courses or they drop the courses? Because although we have had exceptional growth and access and scores, level 3 scores, it's still unacceptable. I think we can all agree. And I'm just wondering, with the ones that we, as more and more students take advantage of this opportunity, what are we doing to keep more and more of them, especially African-American students and Latinos as well?
So I'd like to think that it was as easy as a sit-down with Dale to get that done, but I know that's not the case. Dale, if you want to just talk about a few of the interventions you did, just a couple.
I will say, that was helpful, because it helps us to focus, our work on what's really important. I think the DF report specifically, I took a note, that's something we would have to pull. I do look at the AP drop numbers. Every month I get a report on that. Over time, there's been less and less drops. Partially that's, communication on the front end, but also some of the kind of supports that we're giving to students, including, the first Wildcat Academy of the year. We had an event set up called AP Fall Academy, which was meant to get students over that, initial hump, the initial struggle that some, kind of see at the beginning of the year. That's an event that was asked for by students, given to them, and that was proven to be successful. 2 quick examples from AB Calc. There's more to it. A lot of the work that we do in the math department and in the AP program, there's 66 teachers, and we always talk about relationships. How are you building, those relationships with students? Part of that for us in AB Calc was every Tuesday and Thursday morning during AM support, we had, AM AP support. So we had a location in the hub that AB Calculus students could go to, and we had a rotation of teachers on the team that would be there to help support students. So, sometimes you come to your teacher and there's other classes in there, but this was a focus in the hub on AB Calculus and your success, and teachers were there to support the students. You could hear, a different kind of perspective from another teacher and still get the help that you need in that calculus class. The other thing we did, headed up by Julie Brady, she called them quarter masteries, but basically we told the students specifically, these are 10 things that you have to know. And we're gonna keep, testing on you again and again and again until you get it perfect. And I would say that every student in class did. They repeated that second semester. Here's 10 things that you just have to know. It was derivatives and integrals, were the 2 things, but there was 10 specific topics that you had to get 100% correct. And no matter how many times you took, no matter how much work it took on the teachers, and we made sure that you knew that material and that you could see the uptick in the numbers connected to that. And I would say anytime that we did an intervention like that with a course or a set of students, we've seen a lot of success and actual jump in the numbers. We would look to kind of how can we model that in some of our other courses, AP Gov or whatever we decide to highlight. How do you do that specifically in those courses, right? Hopefully that answers your question.
I'd like to add just a little nuance to that and have Tina just speak just a second about what you do in chemistry. It really is amazing. When you talk about drops and like persistence and keeping kids in a very difficult course, I think Tina can speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So, so far I've had 4 classes of AP Chemistry, and I had my first student drop. I have had 1 student drop, period. And she cited, already having 4 other AP classes, and so she couldn't keep up. For all other students, I have managed to convince them to stay in the course when they discuss dropping. And I think a lot of that, kind of what I talked about, that sense of belonging, is reminding the students that they have a place in my class, and that, a first poor quiz grade isn't indicative of their success in the class for the whole year. But it's a hard message to send. It takes a lot of time. It takes multiple conversations with the students. But if they hear that message, I have found that they are willing to stay. If they hear from their teacher and maybe from another peer, that they belong in that class and that they have the opportunity to be successful in the class, then they will stay. And then just in terms of supports, I too have tutors in my AM support specifically for AP, so that students feel like outside of me, if I'm working with someone else, they have other people to talk to. And AP Chemistry has been represented at all of the Team ASAP supports for the last 3 years. So a lot of students are taking advantage of those, and I think those are things that help keep them in the class and also keep them out of that DF range. Also in these classes, I think so far I've had 1D, and I haven't had anyone fail AP Chemistry yet. Let's hope forever.
Yes.
Okay, so this is kind of a broader question, but In terms of collaboration with the teachers, is there ever any consideration made as to not schedule like big assignments, big projects, big tests, you know, not too many conflicts? Because oftentimes it's not about the ability, it's about all of the other soft skills. So kind of setting the students up, setting them up for success rather than knowing that this is going to be challenging for them trying to juggle.
Yeah, I kind of smiled because that constantly comes up. We have teammates at meetings, you know, monthly, and that's one of the concerns. Like, hey, every Friday, every Thursday, whatever it is, you know, is we have all these tests. Some of the blocking of the AP classes has helped with that. I know APUSH and Ling and Comp for English, them being blocked, they obviously are partnering on, you know, when their classes are. I know we have a stat psych partnership, so they are doing some collaboration on tests. Anytime we try to say this is the day that you give the test, it's been a little problematic, but I think we do know which courses students tend to take, and I think we can continue to look at that. We just haven't gone as far as to say Monday's English, Tuesday's history, you know, and it's difficult to do that based on, you know, the content they're covering, where they're at in the class. So I think it's something that perhaps we can bring up. We have a quarterly meeting with the AP teachers, and we have increasing access and success and advanced placement with the teachers tomorrow afternoon. So perhaps that's something we can add to the agenda to start to get some early problem solving around that. It does come up with the students very often, so.
One thing that I try to tell my students is the importance of advocating for themselves. So I'll announce a unit test, and immediately 6 hands will shoot up and say, we have a test in this class that day. And if that happens and a legit significant percentage of my class has another AP test that day, then I'm open to the discussion about, okay, can we switch it to this day? Similar to other large assignments, when they tell me, you know, individually they'll come and say, I have this and this and this due that day, can I turn yours in 2 days late? You know, that as long as they're advocating for themselves, you know, I'm obviously willing to work with them in that and say, sure, turn it in by this date. And I imagine many other teachers would be as well, but it's that piece of advocating, because as an AP teacher, I don't always know that they have another test or another something happening.
That's great. Pat, go.
So you mentioned the work with AVID teachers. Can you just talk a little bit about what that looks like? Because I think that's a pretty exciting area.
So, I mean, you went to the AVID training. Do you want to just talk about your experience with that?
Sure. So I went to the AVID training, not this past summer, but the summer before. And it was great for me to learn some of the techniques that AVID uses specifically to target kind of middle-of-the-road students, not just the high-achieving students, because obviously my goal in AP Chemistry is to have all types of students enter that course. So those techniques are really useful to me every day, and I see many of my students coming from AVID into my AP class, and then when I look at their Cornell notes, for example, is something that they really talked about a lot at AVID, and then I'm able to recognize those and comment on those to my students. But I think for me personally, more importantly, it's changed a lot of what I do in the regular chemistry class that I teach. Again, hoping that those changes will then encourage some of my students from my regular class to take the jump to AP Chemistry the following year. One specific example is AVID in the sciences really pushes an interactive science notebook. So a notebook in which all of the work, like old school, gets glued and stuck in there, and sometimes things are getting folded out and so forth. And that's something that I've been using in my regular class for the past 2 years, with hopes of helping those students get the skills that they need to be successful next year if they were to choose to take AP.
Other thoughts, Gretchen?
I just wanted to reiterate that point about raw numbers versus percentages that Jonathan brought up at the very beginning. It's, and because we've got the math teacher on the panel there, you ought to appreciate that significance. It pops up, and I raise it all the time when we get these reports, and I think we're getting a little better about it, but it comes up again. I know this is not your topic in our discipline report tonight, We talk about percentages, but we're just doing a percentage change of raw numbers from year to year. Anyway, that's for later. I'll raise it then. But I really wish we'd convert that, because I think it, as Jonathan pointed out, it often tells a better story than the raw numbers. Maybe not always, especially because our population has increased, you know, fairly significantly in the last year or two, and certainly this year. And I just think we'd be more honest with ourselves if we laid it out on a percentage basis. You know, it's an additional step. You've got the raw number, you just, you know, instead of making us dig through our enrollment numbers to do that math ourselves, it would be very helpful. Just to be totally clear, you have not yet established your 3 target areas for next year, because you haven't had that meeting yet. And what were your 3 target areas from last year to this year? And can you give us some sense of how that focus worked in those 3 target areas?
Yeah, well, each department sits down with me and we go through the different subjects, and for each subject, they create their target areas.
So each subject
each
has
subject
3
that
target, oh,
has
well,
3
please
target
don't
areas.
summarize all
So I'm not going to
those. It's a
summarize all
little
that,
late
but
for
I
that,
will
right?
say that math was a very good example. One of the target areas was specifically to reduce the number of ones.
Okay.
And maintaining, you know, the enrollment, the number of exams was maintained, 271 to 274 exams were given. We reduced the number of ones, 49 fewer.
That's tremendous.
And that was that was one of the targets.
Even as a percentage, I'm sure that's
As a
good.
percentage, it's like ridiculous. I mean, as a percentage, it's very impressive. It's more impressive as a percentage. That said, different strategies for different departments. English, I know we worked on short answer, short response. There's some short response questions, and the same for psych. But there are other areas as well.
So a suggestion for future reports might be to take the top 3 highlights, the top 3 best results from that targeted effort to share with us. I'm just trying to think of a way to communicate, because that factoid that you just shared is, I think, really good side by side with the increased numbers of 3 or above, especially by students of color, for example. I mean, I think those things tell a really compelling story, and you don't get lost in kind of all the minutia, which you know, you can slice and dice this many different ways, but that's particularly compelling, I think.
Other comments? Well, I just very quick one, just to ask a little bit about the that pre-year activities. What kind of things you do to prepare students? I think that's I believe it's fairly new, or it's at least expanded and targeted more. And it sounds
Yeah,
really good.
we put up the visual for you, and I don't want to go too far in the weeds of each event. Some of the events are new, some of them have been around for a long time. AP Summer Camp, for example, used to be called AP Boot Camp, and that's probably our original one. You know, a lot of that is about awareness, obviously, from the start, from the forum, just making sure we get it out there. Here are the pathways to AP. Where are you at? What class are you taking? How do you get there? And then once we get past the awareness, we believe, you know, that we'll continue to put the awareness message out there. It is kind of digging in. If you look at the AP agreement, which we've had for the last 2 or 3 years, there's a lot of our philosophical kind of values in that document, and it's meant to be a conversation piece with students that, you know, you can do it. I believe in you. I'm here to help. You know, giving them some of the realities of the difficulties of the class. You know, obviously that kind of philosophy spreads out through the teachers, the policies, the practices that we have as a school, which start to break down remaining barriers that there are to get into the AP classes. So if you look at awareness and access, you know, those are 2 things that are kind of picking that apart. You know, we have had at our lunch meetings, which again, we've had for a long time, we have had more and more freshmen and sophomores and juniors. I mean, juniors and seniors was pretty difficult, but we've had more underclassmen in there talking to the students, hearing their stories of struggle, and so that's been It's hard to quantify, but it's incredibly powerful when you're sitting there as a freshman, black male student, and you see a junior black male student who's having success, who's, struggling, who's in 5 APs, who's in 1 AP, just to see a student articulate what is going on, what it's like, what are the secrets to get in, how have I been successful, to hear that from freshman year, not only know that, I can do it, I can get in there, but here's some of the actual things that you can do to be successful. By the way, you can do them now freshman year. So some of the things that we've done for a long time, we used to have juniors and seniors only at lunch. Now we're increasing that. Obviously, we've talked about reaching to the younger grades. That's happening within the high school and beyond. We have, I could keep going on with some of the other programs, but some of the programs have been around for a while, but continuing to tweak them. I know the college application summer camp is newer. A lot of the students who didn't take an AP course junior year, senior year, they're in AP Psych and AB Calc, 2 AP classes, their first AP classes ever. That's pretty common. And they're also trying to apply to colleges and universities. And so all of that's hitting them at once. And so they had asked for a college application camp. Can I get started on my essay? Can I start to figure out what that's about? What's a FAT? So they can, that's been incredibly helpful to students, which isn't directly related to AP, but connects to their time available, once the school year starts, and being able to balance everything that they have on their plate. So I don't know if that starts to answer your question.
Yeah, that does, because I think that impacts student dropout. I mean, if doing that, I would think is the connection that will help decrease those dropouts, that frustration.
Right.
Students know what they're getting into, really think about it in a way that will help them prepare.
Right, and I think it's moving past the kind of anecdotal, yep, the kids who came, they're better off, to like, hey, these 100 kids went through the summer program, and this is their grades, this is their, drop rate, persistence rate in the class. So we've also philosophically taken a deep look at the AP summer assignments, what they're asking students to do, how we're looking for growth, how we're looking for students to be ready to grow into AP students from day one. So again, a lot of philosophy poured in, but there's specific things, some of which are hard to quantify.
Yes, right. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was very informative. Really good stuff. All right. So we're going to move. And I think you're not going to move, is that correct?
Right into the seal of biliteracy.
All right, the seal of biliteracy.
I
Dr.
have
Davis.
our World Language Department Chair, Rachel Gressel, is with us. She's going to provide us with a brief update on the seal of biliteracy at ETHS, a program that the state of Illinois has adopted and several schools in the surrounding areas have pursued, and we're joining in.
Okay, thanks, Pete. So the state seal of biliteracy was adopted by Illinois about 4 years ago, and it's for students to prove that they're proficient in English and another language. The difference between being bilingual and biliterate is that you have a degree of proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and in listening in another language. This information will be on students' transcripts and on students' diplomas, and it's collectible from colleges and employers. And it's really nice because not only does it highlight the work that we're doing in our bilingual and world languages program, but it also honors students that have heritage languages other than English. For example, our most prominent heritage language here at ETHS would be Spanish. So it might be students that aren't taking AP Spanish or even aren't taking Spanish at ETHS, but they can pass that test of proficiency and receive this special seal. So students are going to demonstrate their proficiency in English based on how they do on the English portion of the SAT. If they are an English learner, they would demonstrate their proficiency on the access test for ELs. And then they're going to demonstrate their proficiency in a language other than English by any official assessment that measures speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So for 2017, 2018, we're going to pilot the ABEL test. That's what we use to place our incoming freshmen. It tests all those modes of communication, and we're gonna test our seniors in February before AP testing gets in, and all the testing fatigue kind of happens. And then students have to receive a special score. It's intermediate high on that Apple test, and a special score that the state hasn't yet determined for this year on the SAT and on the Access test to achieve that seal of biliteracy. Last year in Illinois, we had 72 districts that participated, including a number of area schools, and there's over 25 states in the United States over the last 4 years that have adopted the seal. At least 10 of these states are also considering it. So it's growing and growing worldwide. And so I think it's just a really great kind of no-brainer thing for us to adopt here at ETHS. It's a way to recognize our students that for something that they have, for something that they're pursuing. And, you know, there's just a lot of paperwork that I'll fill out, and we'll be good to go. So I'm open to questions.
Sounds great. Gretchen?
Maybe I missed this, but is it, I know you said many of our students are Spanish speakers, but does this work for any language?
It does work for any language. So we're going to use this year, we're going to do all the languages that we teach that are tested by this Apple test. If a student speaks Urdu, for example, there isn't a national assessment that evaluates Urdu. We have to develop some kind of portfolio that would be state approved, and we would have to figure out someone to rate that. So I feel like after a couple years of figuring out what this Apple test, we would move into those other languages that have demand.
Great.
How many languages are spoken in the school?
Ask the question.
How many languages?
How many languages?
That came up a while
Are
back.
spoken in the school?
Yeah, I mean, we identified a number at some
Oh
point.
my goodness, it's
Like
really high.
70 or something?
Yeah, I don't want to say a number because I'm going to be
I'm
wrong.
thinking it's in the upper 50s right now.
Yeah, I feel like it's
50s,
50
yeah.
something.
Yeah, and that can vary a little bit from year to year. but,
Yeah.
Interesting.
The last number that sticks in my head is 57. I don't know.
So it
In-
doesn't sound like you're going
That's
to
the
run out of work
ballpark.
anytime soon.
No. In the bilingual program that has the students that are recently arrived to the United States, we're currently serving 75 students, and I believe we're serving, I'd say 37 languages of those 75 students.
Wow, yeah. Well, good, yeah.
You can be very busy. You will be very
You
busy.
can have a lot of work.
I love it.
Yes, awesome. Sounds
Thanks.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So next is our report on student athletics. And here we are, Mr. Levatino. Hello.
So I'll be going through the highlights of the report that I shared with you guys last week. So it was a good year last year for ETHS athletics on a lot of different fronts, academically, participation-wise, and, you know, on the fields of play. First off, athletic excellence. You know, I think one of the highlights of the year for me personally was watching our boys and girls basketball teams excel during the winter. Some just incredible moments with some great young men and young women. The boys got as far as the Elite Eight. So did the boys soccer program. Girls tennis, we made history with our first ever single tennis player making it to the championship and finishing in second. She's back as a senior this year. As I mentioned, boys track and field finished 8th in the state last year. A lot of great performances with those young men. Girls basketball won the CSL championship. Here we go. Oops. Lucy Hogan took second place in diving for the second straight year as well. And softball had another incredible year where they broke the record for most wins. They broke the record the year before, and they broke the record again last year, actually shattered it with 23 wins And really exciting, they won their first ever regional championship, which we were fortunate enough to host here. We also had 4 coaches that were recognized either as Coach of the Year or Hall of Fames for their respective sports, plus girls water polo, boys swimming and diving, girls soccer, baseball, football, girls track and field, all had tremendous years. So it was a really great year all around on the competitive sports field. Academic achievement, though, is why we're here at this school, and you know, we had a lot of highlights again last year. We continued to have approximately 3.5 GPA for our student athlete GPA versus around a 3.0 GPA for students that are not involved in sports. Last year, 32 out of our 35 varsity teams for the second straight year earned the IHSA team award for GPAs above a 3.0. And just to really drill down even further on that, 25% of our teams, varsity level teams, had above a 4.0 team GPA, and 2/3 of them had above a 3.5, which is just outstanding. The other thing that we started tracking a few years back was the semester GPAs for Latino and Black student athletes involved in sports and not involved in sports. And I think, you know, 3 years ago when we started looking at this report, I always knew that participating in sports was more than just an activity to compete on a playing field. I knew that it was a great way to connect with the school, and that kids that were involved in sports are going to do better in school. And over the years, looking at these numbers, year after year, those students that are involved in sports, in athletics, do considerably better in school, and especially in our Latino and Black subgroups, those boys and girls are doing better in school when they're involved in an activity. And I think that's really important to emphasize. I think we kind of used to look at sports as the prize for doing well in school, and now I kind of see that sports really, that academic achievement is kind of the prize that you get by participating in sports, if that makes sense. And so I'm excited about what we see year in, year out from our student athletes in the classroom. Participation numbers, it was an incredible year. It was the most kids we've ever had participating in athletics seasonally. We had over 1,900 kids participating in sports. It was a record high for boys, and it was a record high for girls. Participation in 1 year for females jumped close to 10%. It didn't hurt that we added field hockey and opened up more opportunities for girls to participate. That definitely made an impact. Black participation in sports increased for both girls and boys. In fact, our largest increase for any subgroup was our African American girls, 15% increase there. But you know, we still have to do a better job reaching out within the Latino community and helping those kids and families understand that participation in sports is not just a great fun activity, but it's a way to connect better with their school and do better in school with their academics as well. You know, we try to connect with a lot of different groups throughout the community. We try to provide opportunities for kids with the Middle School Multi-Sport Challenge. Something that we've talked a lot about over the years is trying to get kids to understand that we want them to play more sports, not just one, not just specialize. And so we created a Middle School Multi-Sport Challenge, which we roll out every winter during winter break. We had over 150 kids participate in that last year. We've been very active in trying to reach out and get more girls involved in sports before they get to ETHS through the Girls Play Sports Festival and the after-school clinics that we do. You know, I think one of the most important bridges we've built is the opportunity to have someone like Joyce Anderson come on board and serve in advising our student athletes about the opportunities they have to participate in sports in college. And since she's come on board, the numbers have basically doubled in terms of the number of kids playing sports at the next level. In the last 2 years, we've had just under 100 students go on to compete at college, which is just incredible. Prior to that, we had about 25 to 30 kids each year that went on to play college sports. And then we really are trying to reach and help out the kids that don't have the means to pay for summer camp. And we started this program about 8 years ago. Last year, we provided over $34,000 in summer camp financial aid. And I think in total, in the 8 years, we've probably provided over $225,000 in aid to kids that want to be able to participate in sports during the summer, which really helps make a difference and keeps them connected to the programs that they enjoy. I think that, or I know that, the plans that I have listed out for my future hopes within the athletic department have not changed from last year, and I'm not sure that they're ever going to change. You know, one of the big goals, especially a few years back when we recognized just the stark contrast for kids that were involved in sports versus kids that were not, was to really look at the academic eligibility requirements that we have and try to figure out how can we get athletics to serve as an intervention opportunity to help kids do better in school. And I know you guys are reviewing a proposal right now that I think would help do that. And that's really important. I think it's really important opportunity for our kids. I think we have to continue to try to figure out ways to increase participation in the Black and Latino communities still, again, especially in the Latino community. The other thing is, you know, we're constantly looking for more opportunities to train our kids to be better, stronger leaders through sports. We just took the CSL Leadership Workshop last week. We brought close to 30 of our seniors to New Trier, and with the other top leaders from the other 11 schools, had a full-day conference and seminar on leadership skills, and we want to try to do as many of those things as possible to develop leadership. I think, you know, as our numbers continue to increase, we've got to really look at trying to increase the number of coaches that we have on staff to support these larger and larger numbers each and every year. You can only grow so much without, and not increase the number of coaches that are running those programs. And then, you know, a project that we really are continuing to try to work on is just try to make the athletic wing more beautiful. Highlight the history and the tradition of our sports programs. Thanks to our partnership with Northwestern and hosting them for basketball and volleyball this year on the women's side, the revenue we generated from that, we've been able to really revitalize and renovate Beardsley Gymnasium. It's beautiful. The scoreboards that are in there are awesome. And we're looking to systematically try to beautify all of the different athletic facilities that we have. And then finally, I think for us to be successful athletically, you know, we've got to continue to try to improve what we do in the off season with our strength and conditioning programs. So that's just a kind of a quick rundown of what we've done this year and what I think we still need to do. Questions?
Oh, well, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. This is like the third time I've listened or heard this report in the past 2 years. We've always talked about the decrease in participation. Mm-hmm. Or that steady decline, and so I was excited to see those numbers going forward, because just like you, I too believe that engagement definitely lends to better academics and just being engaged totally in this school. So that's an awesome sign. And I also have to always shout out Joyce, because Joyce is an example of an intentional intervention. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's the kind of examples I think we need in order to achieve your future aspiration of how intentional can we be with our students that are, especially those athletes, because they're the largest majority, in making sure that they're successful not just in the season but throughout the season. So awesome year last year. It was a fun year last year, and it was just good to be connected to Evanston, so good job.
Thank you.
Pat?
Chris, and this is a little off the report, but can you give a sense of what some of the professional development is for coaches? Because, I mean, we're talking a lot about, you know, Monique used the word intentional and the intervention. I think that's critical. And you've really emphasized that sports are really a way to support the kids in the classroom. Mm-hmm. What kinds of PD do your coaches have to help them to do a better job of making those connections?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we do a few different things. I think in a lot of different areas, we're trying to help our coaches out. I think, you know, one of the most important things we do is I try to meet with our coaches on a weekly or semi-weekly basis to talk through what their successes are, what their struggles are, to try to help them understand if they're having some struggles with their specific student athletes, whether it's in the classroom or on the field, to help them grow and develop as coaches. I think that's one of the more significant interactions that I have with our kids and the development that we try to have with our kids, or with our coaches, excuse me. You know, and then there's some other things that we try to do with our coaches to try to get them to understand and talk about drugs and alcohol with their kids. We require that they attend, all coaches, not just head coaches, that they attend what we call the Sending the No Use Message seminar, where myself and our drug and alcohol counselor sit down and talk to them about being very mindful and conscious about the messages they're giving kids when it comes to drugs and alcohol. And then I mean, I think the biggest thing when it comes to just their development as coaches is the emphasis on attending clinics within their sports so that they can try to get better as coaches.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Jonathan?
I was thinking in connection with this policy we're talking about academic eligibility for activities in general in athletics. I thought it was interesting looking at the team GPAs and looking at the different semesters, because I was looking to see, is there a big difference between when they're playing and when they're not playing? And I was very pleased to see that there doesn't seem to be for most of the sports. So I think I mean, is that your perception too, that students, you know, are not sort of jacking up their grades for eligibility in that,
right,
at that time,
yeah.
The academic stress carries through the whole year.
Yeah, I would agree. I would actually say that, you know, and it's not true, you know, for every single sport, but a lot of times I look at that exact same thing. So if it's a fall sport, I look to see how they did first semester versus second semester, and a lot of times I find that they actually do better in season than out of season. So to your point, they're not just trying to out of season jack up their grades to try to get eligible. I don't like that term, trying to get eligible. I really think it minimizes the message we're sending to our kids. I think it's a bad message to send to kids that you're just trying to do good enough so that you can play sports. We want them to try to achieve, you know, the highest potential they can, and so I would agree with you there about your point.
I would think that it would be even just the opposite, that they would do better in season when they're together and focused, and then off season, that would be the fall off. But you know, I have to say I'm impressed by the GPAs. The GPAs are looking really good.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, of course, there's more that can be done, and we can see some of the differences between some of the sports. It's important to provide just this culture of support, academic support, for these students as they go through these times. I mean, they're learning how to manage skills. They're learning those soft skills that I think Jude mentioned earlier. This is really when they have to apply them, and what they start and pick up now, this is what they've got. They take it on.
Yeah.
So this is really important. Really important. Any other questions or comments, board?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for this awesome report.
Good job. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
And Chris, I just want to give a shout out to you and your vision, because I know that Joyce Anderson is very much here because of you and your vision for what you saw that we can do for these athletes. And so she's tremendous, but you had the vision and got her here. And thank you.
It was a team effort. Thank you very much.
Okay, shout out to Chris. That was awesome. Yeah, I think we can proceed.
And,
with,
and this is Bill Farmer, who's the director of summer school, and is here to share with us the summer school report.
Sure. I just wanted to give a few highlights on the report that I shared with you last week. And just to give you a general overview, we run a 26-day summer school program that's broken up into 2 13-day sessions. We have over 1/3 of our ETHS students enroll in at least one summer school course. We have a variety of programs. Some of them are for enrichment, some of them are course preparation, and some of them are for academic recovery. To be in compliance with the Illinois School Code, we have to make sure that we build in 60 hours of instruction time for every high school credit of a summer school course. So that happens in 2 different formats. We have some courses that run for 26 days for 2.5 hours a day, and some courses that run for 13 days for 5 hours with a 30-minute lunch break. So as you would expect, especially since we had a kind of an increase in enrollment, we've had a steady rise in our summer school enrollment over the past couple of years. So we surpassed 1,300 students this year. What we find, again, and this is a pattern that is consistent pretty much every year, is that we have a significant portion of our incoming freshmen take at least one summer school course. And they make up almost half of our summer school population. So this year we had pushing upwards to almost 600, so well over 2/3 of our incoming freshmen were enrolled in one course. And then we kind of see the tapering off as you get to the higher grade levels, and we've tried different strategies to see this, but we find that, you know, once students are getting into 11th grade and 12th grade, a lot of them are investing their time and energy into summer employment, so summer school isn't always an option that fits into their busy schedules. There's a couple courses that I wanted to highlight, especially since half of the students enrolled in summer school were in freshman courses. One of the more popular ones is the Access ETHS course, which we had 183 students enroll. We had the highest number of sections of this course that we've ever offered, running 9 sections of Access ETHS to accommodate all of those students. Those students kind of demographically represent all of the population that we have at ETHS. And we also make sure that we offer a co-taught access section to provide students who have IEPs or special needs that additional support as they transition into ETHS. You know, with the Access ETHS, we spend a lot of time helping students to acquire the skills that they need to be successful in high school. We always do a survey feedback, and consistently we get 97, 98% of the students saying that the course either really helped them, you know, feel better acclimated before they walk into this high school. So we're always reassured by that feedback that we get from our students. One of our other big programs is the Reading, Math, and the Social Context course. This is where we look at students' scores, you know, when they're coming into ETHS, and if they fall at a lower level, we do extensive outreach, mailings home, phone calls home. We schedule parent nights to have parents come in to learn more about the class, so that students can get that boost that they need to be successful at the high school level. And what's unique about this course is that the curriculum really tries to integrate math and reading into everyday life. So they embed daily excursions and field trips to see the application of the skills that they're acquiring. This year we had another high number. This is probably the highest number of students we've had in this course. We had 38 students enrolled in this course. And each students are taking the reading test as they move through the year, the summer, and 3 students were able to kind of raise their scores enough to move from reading with support to freshman reading, and then 3 of the students raised their scores significantly enough to move out of reading completely, which put them into the Prep to 1 Humanities course. Some of the other summer prep courses, just so that you can see the breakdown of enrollment. Again, a lot of these courses we have our incoming freshmen take, Prep to 1 Humanities. This year we added Prep to 1 Humanities English and Biology as kind of a pilot course to include a science component in that. And we're hoping that that enrollment kind of grows as we try to merge those two courses together. The prep to math classes are also very popular, with both sessions being filled typically. And we also introduced a new reading and science course. And this is again geared towards students who will be entering their first science course as sophomores, who again just maybe needed some additional reading support to help them be successful in a course that's typically challenging for them during their sophomore year. I included the summer school session dates for the future because even though the official course catalog won't be available until January, a lot of families like to plan in advance around their vacations, so just so that people are aware when these dates fall. Again, with that attendance requirement of 60 hours, sometimes missing several days makes it difficult with people's schedules, so we try to make sure that students realize that attendance is very important on those dates. As far as our goals kind of looking to 2018, we've continued to make strides this year in terms of kind of closing that gap between the revenue and expenditure component. So we're, again, I'm happy to report that we've reduced that gap even further this year from the previous year, so that's a continued approach. And last year we did a 1% sort of like tuition hike to go from $200 to $225 for the tuition, just to kind of keep up with the operating costs with that. But we continue to move forward with that. The other big project that we're working on that we've seen specifically with courses that students are taking for credit recovery, we're trying to work with some of the teachers to kind of revamp the curriculum to make it a little bit more engaging, especially when some of these courses are over a 2.5-hour period or a 5-hour period, and these students have already taken this course. We're trying to find ways for students to be able to engage in the curriculum in new ways and meaningful ways to enhance their opportunities for success. So that's one of the things I've been working with some of the teachers who have expressed interest in kind of, you know, some of these curriculums have just operated as is for however many summers, and finally they're just kind of like, you know, it's time to mix it up a little bit. So, and I will take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bill.
Well,
Questions?
Go ahead. No, I didn't have a question. I thought you were dismissing Bill.
No, not yet. Stay there. Yes. No questions? It's a very good, thorough report. Excellent.
Now I had something.
All right.
I do want to mention Bill Farmer is a science teacher at the high school, primarily biology, but biology and chemistry, and he is one of the 10 finalists for Teacher of the Year in the state of Illinois this year. Congratulations, Bill.
Excellent. Congratulations. Wow.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
You know, so I was on the edge of my seat to
Yes,
say
you
that.
were. I understand. Glad we got that in.
I got it in.
Okay. All right. So we are at this discipline suspension report and report on thefts. So, we got
Okay, and our team
Dr.
is coming up.
Robinson, his family.
Just got some. So we have our associate principal, Dr. Keith Robinson, getting queued up. We have our lead dean, Cynthia Bumbry, and I think that Dr. Campbell is probably going to be ready to chime in, but we'll stay where he's seated.
Looks like we are taking a little bit of a break. Yes.
There are a lot of scene changes
Yes.
tonight.
All right, scene changes. Some of us needed our break earlier.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Keith Robinson, the new Associate Principal for Educational Services, here with our Head Dean, Cynthia Bumbry. We wanted to go through our discipline data for last year. Here are some of the items that we'll quickly discuss. The first one, the number of discipline actions and suspensions. One of the things that we noted was there was a significant decrease. If we compare the data from 2012-13 to 2016-17, about 29% of suspensions. Students definitely were able to stay in school a lot more. We were able to reduce the days spent outside of the classroom by 63% when we look at last year's data compared to this year. So the number of students who receive one or more suspensions as far as unique students did total number, which is 262, which is just a 5% decrease from last year. 92% of ETHS students did not have any suspensions at all. This does show a downward trend with students who are being suspended out of school. So again, just comparing a couple of the years, we did notice that there was a downward trend with all subgroups of students being suspended out of school. Most recently, the Hispanic or Latino students were down 2%, as well as our white students 1% between this year and last year. And we stayed about the same for our Black or African American students. Lost property. We also did put in a lost property report. One of the things we wanted to note that the lost property did not necessarily equal theft. The data has been kept from May 2016 to the present. We have one full year of good data and wholesome data for the year. The most commonly reported lost items last year were cell phones, which was 39%, wallets, clothing, bicycles. And that's also pretty interesting because we had students who would lose a backpack, which would contain clothing, cell phones, and wallet. So sometimes the data is a little deceiving and skewed. Last year, we also had 19 total suspensions due to theft. So that's in a nutshell, and we are here for questions.
Okay, questions. I like the way you highlighted that lost property doesn't necessarily equal theft. So I know that it's hard to track that. As I was looking through this report and seeing the cell phones, for example, I mean, I know some of us lose our cell phones a lot, right, Gretchen? Like leave them places. So I don't know, can you talk a little bit more about that lost property and what you know happens for students?
Sure. So, and Cynthia, jump in if you get a chance. But students who lose property, they're able to go online and submit the lost property with a report. Yes. We had a lot of parents submit the request or to report the lost property. Some students, we've had some folks who are even visiting guests. We had one person report that they lost their wallet 6 years ago. So some of it is kind of, you know, it's just an open-ended report. Yeah. The safety has tried to reach out to many of the families. About 38% of the families didn't return a phone call. So it was still kind of unclear if those students found what they reported lost. As far as the dean's office is concerned, we had 19 reported thefts that we did consequence students on. But, you know, that's kind of where we were.
Yeah, because we've had a student this year who reported that his cell phone was stolen in PE in the locker room. His dad called up here and, you know, had a few words for the safety officer and for my secretary. And then the next day, I see the student in the cafeteria. I said, well, did you find your phone? He said, oh, yeah, I left it in my biology class. So I said, well, let's go call your dad, let him know that it wasn't stolen from the locker room, that you actually left it in biology and you found it. So sometimes we don't know when students find stuff later on.
Yeah.
Even though it's listed as lost or theft, we don't know because they don't report back to us. Just so it happened that I saw him the next day and asked him about it. That's how I found out. So it just depends on each situation's different.
While you're talking about lost property, since I'm out and about the school all the time, when students find something, they often come and hand it to me. So I've turned in 2 cell phones since school started, an ATM card, a sweatshirt, and countless ID cards. But I always appreciate that our students will spot something and, you know, find me in the hall or out front and give it to me, and of course I can turn it in. And then usually, I turn it into safety at the front desk. Usually they'll be able to report back to me, for example, hey, we found that cell phone owner, we found that ATM card owner. So we do try, you know, again, I think it happens with all of us. Maybe it happens a little more frequently with teenagers.
Yeah.
You know, things get misplaced or lost. And I think there's a nice rhythm. Is every item that's found turned in? Probably not, but I'm always impressed with how many students will come up and turn things in to me. So just a little bit more. These are kind of anecdotal stories about lost property, but it's just something that kind of goes on regularly.
Yeah, I know that, I don't know that there's any way to track that. I know we put that system in place. I wonder if we can put something in that system, just encouraging students to circle back if they find their lost item, if they could, and some will, some won't, of course, but for those few that will, that might be one way for us to keep track of it. Jonathan.
A couple questions. You know, we've all been very concerned nationally, as well as at ETHS, about the disproportionate discipline of students of color. And in this report, it says that 66% of students who were suspended were black. And what we don't have here, and I would have found helpful, is historical context. Is that up? Is that down? Is it the same? Do you have any information on that?
Are we talking about this page that's right here or a different one?
No.
No, it's not here.
It's, I don't know if it was a slide. It was in the report. It had number of suspensions by demographic group. And then it was page 4. And it had for 2016-17, what percentage of the suspensions were black students, students with IEPs, low-income students, but it only had the numbers for 2016-17, so I can't get from that if we're making progress or if we're not, or.
Well, I mean, what we have is definitely a reduction. Of course, we have an increase in student population, but back in 2009, it was literally about a third of the black students being suspended, which dropped to a quarter, and now we're down to 17%. But as far as having that in, that's definitely something that we could include.
No, what I mean is not the percentage of black students who are suspended, but the percentage of students suspended who are black. In other words, the disproportionality. And we don't seem to have any historical data on whether that is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same.
I bet we have that. I just don't think it's in this report.
Yeah.
But because we look at it every year.
Right. I mean, but I don't remember last
Right.
year's numbers the year before. And
Right.
I'd like to hope we're
Yes.
moving in the right direction, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But you're right. We
Yeah.
do have that.
We have that, yeah.
And we'll send
Okay.
you a follow-up on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. We just have to have it, we just have to break it down so that we can
Yes.
see.
I can tell you that overall, that number continues to drop. And remember, 66% of is still a very small percentage of our black students.
Yes.
It's 66% of the suspensions, which is already a
Right.
small number of suspensions. But it is disproportionate, most definitely, and that is something that I know the deans are really focusing hard on. But we'll get you the year-to-year comparison.
The other question I had,
No, go ahead.
The other question I had was about discipline actions and suspensions. So there's a chart, I don't know if it was in the slide. Yes, that one, okay? So the number of suspensions is down, but the number of discipline actions is up, which is going to prompt, I'm sure, in the view of, some members of the public, they'll see this slide and they'll say, are we simply punishing students less even though their behavior is worse? That is, if there are more discipline incidents, but fewer of them are being punished with suspension, is the behavior of our students getting worse?
Part of it is that we have, as we said, the enrollment's been going up the last couple of years. That's part of it, so you have more. And what we're doing, we're utilizing more of the alternatives to suspension, a lot more. So the behavior hasn't, I don't think it's gotten any worse. We're just finding other ways to change the behavior without suspending kids.
But any student who is disciplined in any way is in that count of discipline actions, right?
Should be.
Right? Okay, so yeah, I understand that a much higher proportion of them those actions are being addressed through, much less severe punishments. But I guess the question is, the number of, are we in a situation where what used to be a suspendable offense is not being suspended, not because there are fewer of those incidents, but because we're just choosing not to suspend?
Probably in some instances, I would say yes. And that's because we have changed our philosophy here in the building. And also because of Senate Bill 100. So we're trying other means to modify the behavior without suspending students. We want to keep the students in class as much as possible. That's what's happening.
And I'm not finding it exactly, but wasn't there a point made about there's been a higher increase in unauthorized presence, which is sort of like you're in the hall without a pass? So
Yes.
could that maybe have brought that number higher?
Yes.
Because you're being more attentive to
Yes.
that
And that was-
pre-problem behavior?
Yes. That was one of our goals last year for our safety department, to really crack down on students in the hallway, and so they did on a regular basis. And so therefore, we did have more students who were written up for unauthorized presence, some defiance of authority as a result of that, because sometimes they didn't want to go where safety wanted them to go to. So that's what those numbers are from.
Yeah, the way I was going to word it, and you did a better job, was it may have more to do with the diligence in reporting than students misbehaving more. Yeah.
Which is kind of like increased incidence of cancer or other diagnoses. Sometimes we get better at diagnosing rather than actually seeing a bump in that condition.
Right.
You touched a little bit on the philosophy of why we're not suspending, and I know that we all know that, but I think it might be helpful just to talk a little bit about why we're what we're doing and why we're doing some other alternative disciplinary actions so that students learn and we can move them toward better habits or whatever. I don't know.
Well, the main thing is that we all know that if students are not in class, they're not going to do as well.
Right.
So we want to keep them in class as much as possible. And as far as, out-of-school suspension, we only do that when we really have to. So if possible, we put them on in-school suspension where they can still have access to teachers. They can come in for AM support. Teachers can come down. They can get help while they're inside. So they're getting the education still, even though they're on inside.
Yes.
And some of the alternatives we're using, we're working on skill building with the students, whether it be through the Brotherhood, Sisterhood Empowerment programs, through our peer mediation. All those things are helping students learn how to problem solve so that hopefully they don't repeat the same things.
Thank you.
Pat, can I ask a question that follows that?
Yes.
That was my question too, and I was wondering, to what extent are you like, do these programs, like the Brotherhood or Sisterhood Empowerment, do they go beyond? So I've gotten in trouble, and I'm now in that. Is that something that goes on for a period of time after, maybe helping me so I don't get in trouble again, or there's follow-up? I guess that's what, kind of the question
Usually
is, what
they're-
happens?
Most of the programs have 6 sessions for them, and if the students want to, they can, they've made that connection with the person in the building, so they can follow up with them. But generally, sometimes the students have to go through the same program 2 or 3 times before they get it, but eventually, most of them do get it.
We're,
Yeah, I wanted to ask, regarding the unauthorized presence. So there are probably a wide range of reasons why students are not where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. One of them is avoidance. Could be caused by, again, a range of issues. If the student is struggling in the class, that may be their way of avoiding that situation. If the student has poor relationships, a poor relationship with his or her teacher, that can be a reason why they're avoiding. So I'm just wondering, how personalized are these interventions? Because there's a reason why, especially if they're repeatedly found in an unauthorized place or not in class when they're supposed to be. How prescribed are we in making those interventions with these students? Where are we at with that?
Where I would like to go with the unauthorized presence, and to me, it's also an issue we have when students have earned an NC. They don't want to come back to class because the reintroduction to class is a problem for them, depending on the teacher. So what I would like to see happen is that, you know, the student have an advocate that goes with them, with the teacher, so when they go back, say, you know, I know they've missed these days, where do we go from here? What can you do to help the student from this point on so the student wants to come back to class? And those are things that we need to work on more closely with our teachers to reintegrate the students within the class.
And I'll add to that, those empowerment programs are run by counselors and social workers and sometimes interns. And so when they run the sessions, if the student services personnel deem that there are some other social emotional issues that are happening, they follow up accordingly.
we're looking at trying to figure out partnerships too, with being very prescriptive to the behaviors that we're seeing, so we can be very intentional with supporting those students. One of the things with the defiance of authority and also the unauthorized presence, you know, a lot of that we saw being very subjective. So one of the things that we've seen and noticed this year with some of our new changes in our procedures, that those numbers have dramatically decreased. So what we're hoping is for the remainder of the year that we're going to continue to see those numbers decrease as well.
Monique,
Yeah,
Monique and then Gretchen.
Okay, just a quick question. First, welcome, Keith. Right? This is your first year,
Yeah.
first school year, so welcome. So, yeah, Jude led me to a question of clarity. There's a difference between tardy detention and unauthorized access, right? So the tardy and detention, is that tardy to school, tardy into the classroom? Because I'm going somewhere with this, but
I'm gonna beat you to it.
all right.
Okay. I looked at that too when I saw this, and to me, it should be a different category. One for tardy and one for detention. Detentions
Yeah.
in there
Yeah.
are what they're talking about, are extended detentions. The way it looks like we suspend kids for being tardy. And we
Right.
don't. So it should be a separate category. We don't suspend kids for being tardy to class.
Okay.
Extended detention could be, you had your phone out in class, didn't put it away. You had an extended detention, it's reschedule. At some point, it turns into an in-school suspension. So that's what the extended detentions turn into in school. So you're not getting suspended for being late to class.
Okay, because I was leading to the pie chart
Yep.
of the 22% of the discipline occurring in the classroom and wondering, I'm sure we know which classrooms are high-frequency classrooms, but, so because I was reading that subcode, I went there.
Yeah.
Saying, okay, are we just handing out because, you know, they're late to the class? Because I just narrowed in on that because 152, African Americans were disciplined for being tardy/detention. So I'm like, that's okay, we can get at that, but I was trying to understand detention, so I agree with you.
Okay.
It can be deceiving, it should be broken down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Gretchen?
I just, yes, welcome, Keith. Hi. Because you haven't been here for all the years that I keep bringing it up, this issue of raw numbers versus percentages. When you were sitting in the back and I was talking about it during an earlier report, I just wanted to reiterate it here because I actually think so for example, and I'm not looking at your slides, but I'm looking at page 6 of your report, the jaggedy decrease line, which shows a decrease in the number of students receiving 1 or more suspensions. Do you see that decrease line? And we say the number of students who've received 1 or more suspensions decreased by 5%. Well, in raw numbers, it decreased by 5%, but as a percentage, it's probably better because in more recent years, we have more students. Right? So I mean, I just really think it's important to tell that story in the most accurate way. And the raw numbers tell you a story, but if you, it's only accurate if our student population remains the same every year, and it definitely doesn't.
Right.
So I just really wish as an institution, because I've been on the board for over 8 years now, and I feel like I keep bringing this up, so I'm just going to keep bringing it up as long as I keep seeing it. And I'm even an English major. I'm not Mr. Liebforth here, so it's not like I'm fixated on the numbers. I would love to see it, especially when it's telling an important story that would be improved with that kind of reporting. I mean, I know that you can't get to the percentage until you have the raw number. But we've got to take it to the next step when we do these kinds of reports, not just discipline, but all of our reports. So anyway, for what it's worth, welcome, and I hope you can do that going forward.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mark?
I think it's important that we not go too deeply into this data and rely on it too much, because there's, data, you got to understand what it's telling you, what it's not telling you, and what affects that data, right? You know this, but student behavior, and teacher behavior, and safety officer behavior, and in the midst of a changing philosophy, as Dean Bumbry pointed out about, how we're doing this, how we're administering and doing different programs, everything changes all the time. So the numbers get affected by that, right? So I guess what I'm leading up to is just a simple question, and Keith, this isn't fair because, as has been noted, you haven't been here a long time, but or at least this time around you haven't. But Dean Bumbry, I'll ask you. I mean, just in general, do you feel like our student behavior is better than it's, is it following this trend line where the actual student behavior is better than it was in the past, or is it about the same and we're just handling it in different ways?
It comes in ebbs and flows. For instance, like 2 years ago, we had an excessive number of weapons in the building. And what I mean by that, pepper spray, mace, it's like we didn't have that before.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it looks worse on the charts. But overall, it's about the same. It's pretty much about the same. It hasn't changed a whole lot as far as the extreme behaviors versus the good behaviors of the kids.
Yeah, I guess what I'm also thinking about is, and not so much a question, but Jude, you brought up, I mean, so much of this is tied to well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't act out because, they're planning a jailbreak around here or whatever, and they, let's rally the troops. They act out because there's problems, I think more often than not, right?
Yeah.
So this whole report also reflects very heavily on student well-being, and I guess that's really the root of the question that I asked is, how are they? What is their state of well-being overall? And I guess I'm hearing it's about the same.
It's about the same. The difference, I would say, is that we have to do more with the students to get them where we want them to before. Before, you could tell them once, twice, that was it. Now you might have to tell them 3, 4, 5 times to get the same result. if that makes sense.
Sounds like some homes.
And one of the things that I found too, there's this whole notion of being and feeling safe and connected. So as you know, the relationships with our staff in the building really play a huge and significant role in that. So we're always looking at ways of better connecting these kids with not just each other, but we're also looking at outside support as well. So getting support both inside the building and district as well as outside.
Thank you.
I'd just like to, Keith, I really like what you just said now, because when I look at the disproportionate percentage of African Americans that are involved in discipline infractions, to me, it's either we believe that they have a propensity to cross the line or be unruly, or this particular group doesn't feel included in the school culture. I think it's really about the school culture and those students who feel like they're not a part of the institution. I'm just putting that out there. It's based on relationships and how do you reach them as teachers? How do we welcome back a student that has been gone from suspension? Are we methodically going through this? Do we have certain practices and traditions that we go through when students are welcomed back into the building so that they feel like they're not on the outside looking in? But I don't understand any other way to explain the disproportionate numbers, and I do understand that this is national, it's historical here, but it's totally unacceptable. So I just wanted to put that out there.
No, I appreciate that. And again, one of the things that we're looking at is seeking more support from our community partners with kind of pairing up and looking at that mentorship, or really being prescriptive and finding out specific ways students feel engaged and connected in whatever way. So we're really exploring ways now to do so more effectively.
This is consistent with where we always are. We land here when we talk about this report. When I saw it on the agenda, I knew what it was going to look like, and it looks the way I predicted, and we all knew that it would look like this. This is also the year that we as a district have taken on a different way of looking at black males. By recognizing these patterns and calling these patterns out, we've committed ourselves to trying to figure out a better way. So I'm hoping that we will start seeing, and I know we can't turn this around very quickly, but I'm hoping that we can think outside the box. What other things can we do? You mentioned relationships. Relationships are very important, and we've been trying to figure out how to connect with these students, with all of our students, but particularly our most marginalized students. We've been trying to figure out how we can connect with them for a long time. So I don't have answers, and we're talking about some other ways we can make sure that they feel a part of this school on a regular basis, that we don't have policies that keep them out and marginalize them more. So we're still looking at those, looking at our policies. We'll continue to do that, but we still have to think about what do we do? How can we respond? And I heard you, Dean, say that it's kind of the same. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate you not trying to come here and say, oh, we're getting better. Because you see it every day. You see it, you're there, you see it, you're in the halls with the students, you see what's happening. So I take this very seriously. We've really got to think a little bit deeper about how we can connect with students, what we can do, how we can hold them accountable, and teach them how to be more responsible citizens and be a part of our school in a better way. And we have to take it on as adults. So, I'd say all that. It's not really a question.
Just one final comment. This is hard work, so this is not easy, but this is the one report that I like seeing the decline, right? And it is declining, because I pay close attention to this because it is hard. And Dean, your comment about it being steady, I can tell you that I see it in the community, and it does ebb and flow. And it's at a younger age, so it's ridiculous for us to think if we don't change the trajectory earlier, sooner, that it's just going to disappear when the behavior is going to disappear when it comes to the high school. And then, Keith, you mentioned the, working with other partners and organizations and being innovative. And, I communicated that last time, that this is a community effort. Dr. Witherspoon spoke of this years ago before Credo was implemented, that this was not something that the high school could do alone, because a lot of the behaviors and issues come through the front door when our students come in. Now, how we welcome them and make sure that they are appreciated and belong here, that's our duty, that's our responsibility. But there's a call out to the community, and I won't stop saying that, because it's that vital if we're ever going to see the disproportionate rate disappear. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also realistic. And it's not going to happen in the 4 years that we have them if we don't implement change earlier on. So this is hard work. I'm passionate about this. Everybody else is. And I just, I applaud. This is another thing that I'm truly excited about, or I'm glad I'm connected to Evanston in this way, because we are trying to do new things and be innovative, and it's hard to deal with that student every day that's causing, I know, because I see him. So it's hard, but it's worth it. And so, however we can help and support and be on the downward spiral, then, I think you have that support from us. But it's not going up.
No, it's not.
True.
So, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, love them. All right. Okay, fabulous. Okay. So moving right along with our agenda, we are at comments from the public. Dr. Davis?
Yes, we have 6 people signed up for comments from the public. This is a reminder to speakers that comments should be limited to 3 minutes. And as a courtesy, I'll let you know when you have a minute. I'll just go into the microphone and say 1 minute, so we'll know that there's a minute left. And then my phone will go off, and then we'll have an awkward moment. But as I try to figure out how to turn my phone off. First up, we have Trinity Collins is the first speaker.
Hello, I hope all of you are doing well tonight.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Trinity Collins, and I'm here on behalf of the Evanstonian staff in regards to the September 22nd confiscation about In-Depth on marijuana usage. So we chose, for all of you who don't know, In-Depth is a series of articles that focus solely on one topic that we deem to be too important to cover in an individual article by itself. And for the September 22nd issue, the Evanstonian decided to focus on marijuana usage. And we decided that it was a prominent and important aspect of student life and culture at ETHS, and that it needed to be covered in a large public way to bring light to it, and etc. So we felt comfortable doing this because of ETHS's reputation as an inclusive community, welcoming freedom of speech on multiple levels. And we covered 4 main articles within it, the first being legislation in Illinois, which spoke on the Illinois' debt, and more specifically about floating the idea that legalization could fill the deficit that Illinois debt currently has. Our second one was health benefits, which we focused on the medical marijuana's influence on mental illness. And then the third was why students smoke weed. They came to the conclusion that the primary usage of weed was because of stress. And then the fourth and final one was an interview with a drug dealer. So the reason that we had included the interview with the drug dealer was because we did not want to limit our focus to just why students do it, but also the students that deal it and the students that get marijuana to the students and all of that, because that is a part of the student culture, is the people that deal drugs. And I want to make it clear that our purpose in printing these stories was try to discover why so many students smoked or used marijuana, and our purpose was not to promote any usage or encourage any students
One minute.
or to condone illegal activity or encourage students to use weed. And then we began distributing the paper on September 22nd, and approximately an hour or two into it, department chair confiscated the paper and spoke with Katie Donati, who's one of our executive editors, who will speak to you later today. And we received very little explanation, or if any at all, about why it was confiscated. And that left us very confused about what was wrong with the issue, what we did that wasn't important. And there are other Evanstonian staffers that will speak to you today regarding our further issues with the problems. So thank you.
Thank you. And time.
There we go.
There, it works. Okay.
All right.
There we go. All right. And thank you. Next up is Margot Levitan.
Hi, I'm Margot Levitan and an online executive editor for the paper. Evanston is a community that is well known for valuing free speech. With the new dress code allowing student protests and welcoming reputation, it's a very inclusive community. In fact, our sports teams recently garnered some press with taking a knee during the national anthem, with Dr. Witherspoon's words on free speech being really great to hear as a student journalist. Thus, it came as a surprise when our most recent edition of the newspaper was confiscated due to our stories regarding marijuana usage. As a school newspaper, our main goal is to cover the most relevant topics for our peers. Marijuana is a part of student culture here, and we decided to take advantage of our free speech as a part of the Evanston community. We decided to use our student platform to professionally report on a relevant topic. Like Trinity mentioned, we are not condoning marijuana usage, and we wanted to come with the most professional outlook possible. So we were disappointed when our most recent issue was confiscated because it touched on a controversial topic. As student journalists, we hope that Evanston's message of free speech would apply to student voices as well, even if the subject is considered taboo. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Katie Donati.
Hi. Sorry, I get nervous public speaking sometimes. So, I was just going to continue on some of the issues that were touched on earlier. I was disappointed, I'm Katie, I'm an executive editor of the paper, specifically of In Depth, so this really hit home with me. And I was really disappointed with the lack of explanation we received. After the paper was confiscated, I was told that I had to talk to my teacher or that I had to jump through multiple hoops to get an explanation, which seemed kind of crazy because we spent over 9+ hours laying out the paper, which is on a light side for like what we would do to design the paper. Additionally, like knowing what the students went through to get these stories and to get interviews, I know that the one who did legalization in Illinois reached out to multiple state senators. They reached out to people in the community. They really went outside their box to try and get issues. And just more than that, out of In Depth, every single story was really well put together in this issue. And it seemed like a shame that the whole issue was taken and then not even explained to us really specifically. Following this incident, we attempted to set up a time with one of the administrators to get an explanation, but no response was given. And following that, we also then sent another email to the person that took the paper. And several days later, we received an email back that asked for a meeting this upcoming Friday. However, this is a full issue cycle beyond the stories in question, and it kind of was, it was unfair and inexcusable to take the paper, and then I get the administration is busy, but it's really disorganized for us when we don't know how to approach the next issue, not knowing what the issues were before. It was frustrating that we sat down that morning with an administration member, showed them the in-depth, and they okayed it, and then to have it taken just a couple hours later was just really confusing, and then not given an explanation was just really heartbreaking, especially knowing all the work that every single writer put into the stories. Thank you. Now, Michael Colton.
Michael Colton, you're up.
Hello, my name is Michael Colton. I'm also an executive editor and a senior at ETHS. I too will be touching on the issues that my peers have just talked about. But I'm here to talk not only about the moral and ethical concerns with confiscating the paper, but also with the legal side of things. For those of you who don't know, in 2016, the Illinois General Assembly enacted the Illinois Public Act 990678, which can be referred to as the Student Free Press Act, and that protected the rights of student newspapers in public high schools to choose what content they print and to distribute those papers freely with the overseeing of an appointed advisor, in this case being Mr. Rodney Lowe, who I'm sure all of you know, seeing as he's worked at this high school for many years. The law protects students from distributing their paper as they please, which we moved forward with in printing our marijuana stories, and it gives the administration the right to restrict student press only on the grounds that stories printed contain libelous, slanderous, or obscene information, constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy, violate federal or state law, or can be seen to incite students to commit an unlawful act, to violate policies of the school district, or to materially and substantially disrupt the orderly operation of the school. And we as a staff hold that none of those things apply in this instant because, as referred to earlier, all stories printed were of student voice. We surveyed students. We got their opinions on the matter. We didn't print any opinion stories. There were no editorials inviting students to use marijuana or romanticizing the usage of marijuana in any way. And on those grounds, we ask that the paper be allowed to be redistributed by you all, the school board, and by administrative officials sitting among us today. But this issue goes beyond just the content of the paper. It's a matter of principle. The law also provides that administration must give the student press information regarding the confiscation of paper regarding the confiscation of the paper without undue delay prior to the limitation of the distribution of the paper. And we hold that seeing as our meeting with administration has been set 3 full weeks after the issue in question, that undue delay has not been met. And we, as Katie said, we are confused as to how to move forward, and really the further distribution of our paper has been muddied by this whole incident. So I ask, my staff asks, all students really ask for simply communication among the school board, among the administration, and among us as the Evanstonian as to how we will move forward with distributing our issues and choosing our content. And we ask that you respect not only the rights of us among state law, but also our student rights in an inclusive and free-speaking community to distribute our paper freely, to choose our own content, and to really express ourselves as we see fit in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mariam Judar.
Good evening. I'm Mariam Judar. I'm Executive Director and Community Lawyer at Citizen Advocacy Center. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization with a mission to build democracy, and we do that through community lawyering and public policy advocacy. I'm here because Michael and the rest of the staff, or the editorial staff at the Evanstonian, reached out to us for assistance to understand what happened, what their rights are under the law. And as Michael explained to you, there is a new student press rights law that gives students in Illinois on their school papers greater First Amendment rights than the U.S. Constitution affords as interpreted by the Supreme Court. And this law, as Michael explained to you, has very specific reasons enumerated by which the paper can be confiscated or a story can be restrained from publication. And as he very eloquently described, none of them seem to fit in the situation. And because of the fact that no justification has been given to the students, even though it's been days, and I'd like to emphasize that, 3 weeks before setting a hearing with the students to explain what the justification is to remove the table, to remove the paper, to me, that's not without undue delay. Without undue delay is providing that explanation at the time of the confiscation, or at least before the end of the day that that paper was confiscated. And what is justification? So if we look at the fourth one, I think that's probably the one that probably the school's gonna hang its hat on, and that has 3 parts to it. Inciting students to commit an unlawful act, violating policies of the school district, and materially and substantially disrupting the orderly operation of the school. So what specific facts does the school have to justify that the newspaper incited students to commit an unlawful act? There has to be specific facts to back that up. Which policy, if any, of the school district does the expression violate? And is this policy superseded by the state law that guarantees that student journalists in Illinois should have these protections, these student speech rights protections?
1 minute.
Finally, materially and substantially disrupting the orderly operation of the school. What is the evidence that school authorities had reason to anticipate that the paper would substantially interfere with the work of the school or impinge upon the rights of other students? The school must be able to show that its action was caused by something more than a mere desire to avoid the discomfort or unpleasantness that always accompany an unpopular viewpoint or a controversial topic. Officials must base their forecast of material and substantial disruption on specific facts, including, for example, past experience in the school and current events that influence student behavior. But they can't rely on undifferentiated fear or apprehension as a justification. Also, the test is a substantial disruption. So that means, was the disruption to a considerable or an important degree or to a great and significant extent? As it stands, and I'll close this up, it appears that the action of school authorities was based upon an urgent wish to avoid the controversy which might result from this expression. And this is unlawful in the state of Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Stan Zoller.
Good evening. My name is Stan Zoller, and I'm here tonight on behalf of several organizations, including the Illinois Journalism Education Association, the Chicago Headline Club, and the Midwest Journalism Education Initiative. Perhaps most importantly, however, is I'm here as a journalist and a journalism educator with more than 40 years of experience. When I was looking for information about tonight's meeting, I happened across the website for Evanston Township High School. On its homepage is an important message, inspiring a lifelong passion for learning. Part of that passion is providing our young people an education that extends beyond the schoolhouse gate, one which addresses the need for students to become strong and regular stewards of civic engagement. In the past 2 years, Illinois has taken the lead in civics education, highlighted by the signing of House Bill 4025 by Governor Rauner. That bill, as you know, mandates a civics education class for all public high school students in Illinois. But it's more than a curriculum. It is a gateway to understanding the importance of civic engagement at all levels of government. A key component of civics education is a free and independent media. That's not only my opinion, but the view of the Illinois State Board of Education's Task Force on Civic Education. In its May 2014 report to the Illinois Legislature, the task force noted that, quote, high-quality standards for civic education include skills, not just content. They also include news literacy. News literacy is the ability to critically think media content in any form, print, broadcast, or online. However, without a free, independent, and non-biased media, students are deprived of this opportunity, which is why the confiscation and restraint of distribution of the September 22nd issue of the Evanstonio is so inexcusable. Prohibition of circulation of any media, not just a student publication, denies students the opportunity to be exposed to the voice of their peers. It gives student journalists a chance to practice the craft guaranteed by the First Amendment. The Evanstonian is, and has been for decades, an outstanding student publication.
1 minute.
Its staff is not only passionate about journalism, but talented as well. 2 years ago, as I'm sure you know, Evanston High School reigned as state champions in the IHSA State Journalism Tournament. But now that voice has been silenced. And for what? Because an administrator that thought it might embarrass the school? Because an administrator wanted to flex his or her administrative muscle? No one will agree if everything in the news, whether mainstream or student. That, however, is the beauty of a free and independent press and the foundation, again, of civic engagement. Confiscation of newspapers is not found in free and responsible societies, but in those where government leaders have disdain for a free and independent press and relish suppression of citizen voices. Is Evanston High School heading in that direction? It appears so. The solution is simple. The board and school administration need to demonstrate the passion for lifelong learning by immediately releasing the September 22nd Evanstonian to the ETHS community so it can be informed news consumers and active stewards of civic engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Okay. So we are at FOIAs. Dr. Davis, we have 6. Did you want to say something about them?
Yes, we have 6 FOIAs. We have a FOIA from Dudek, a FOIA from Hurley from the city of Evanston, a Hurley from another one from Cath, one from Powell, one from Mora, and another one from Cath.
Okay. And they're in the packet?
Correct.
So, thank you. Okay. So we are at board joint committees, board committees, I'm sorry. The first one is the joint committee for District 65 and 202. There's a report, Jonathan and I, and who else was there? Gretchen was there. I think that's it, yeah. So it's in the packet. Any questions about that? No? All right. And then there was an Ed luncheon on Friday. I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Gretchen.
I wasn't really prepared to, but it was a good, I'll make sure that we circulate. I think there were some handouts of the PowerPoint. There was some PowerPoint, so I'll make sure we get that around. Right. There was a speaker from the Illinois Conference of State Legislators who gave us the legal landscape on charter school, private school, tax voucher efforts across the country. As you all probably have heard, part of the new school funding bill that recently passed includes a tax credit provision for donations to pay for private school tuition. So that was helpful to get a sense of what that looks like across the country. Illinois is one of 18 states that has such a provision. And then there was a Senator, Dan McConkey, who's a Republican, who was a proponent of that element of the bill. He talked about it and certain other elements of the school funding bill. And then help me out, Pat, who was the third speaker? I'm getting tired at this late hour. Oh, yes, that's right. Aris Delianis from Frantic Radelet talked about TIF districts.
Yes.
And some possible changes on the horizon with respect to TIF districts, which was very interesting and helpful. As you know, TIF districts, we have a few here in Evanston.
Yes.
So it was good to hear that, and I'll make sure we circulate.
Yes. Yeah, we circulate the PowerPoint. Mary was there as well.
Yeah, Mary was there with us.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we're going to move on with the student board report.
Hello, everyone, and happy homecoming week. So today, ETHS students sported festive socks and will continue to show school spirit with superhero garb, athletic attire, and pajamas throughout the week. So go kids. First quarter is really gaining speed. YAMO celebrated 60 years this past weekend, and certain sources can confirm that Dr. Gorin may make a guest appearance during the hilarious milestone. That's neither here nor there. And in the vein of student voice and creativity, Wild Kit Radio an online student-run radio station, begins broadcasting this week. It'll broadcast original content and music 24 hours, 7 days a week. So tune in for sports, news, music, and more. And as mentioned in the public comment, ETHS student athletes have recently exercised their First Amendment right and protested police brutality by taking a knee during the national anthem of various sporting events. And my findings have shown, just by talking to various students, that the support and cooperation from the administration contrasts the punitive actions found in other high schools in the country. So ETHS remains like this island of acceptance and love in trying times, and the vast majority of students at ETHS feel the weight of the administration's core principles and dedication to combating systems of oppression. Part of my role as student representative is I'm also president of Student Senate. And Student Senate is an extension of the administration and also focuses on student voice and really tackling policy issues within the school. And recently, we've been working to address a pervasive issue in the larger community, a rape culture tied to high school athletics. So given the sexual assault and hazing allegations at Niles North High School and predatory behaviors demonstrated by a few ETHS students in recent years, it is vital that the administration take on preventative measures to educate athletes and deconstruct hypermasculinity abound in sports culture. This connects to the athletic report given earlier tonight as an intervention for those involved in athletics, and is something coaches can do and the whole athletic department can really get involved in. So we Senate plan to work with community leaders to plan and organize a mandatory seminar for male athletes centered around a conversation between community leaders and the students in the style of the Men Taking a Stand event hosted by the YWCA last May, which really highlighted tackling the foundations of rape culture in just the language we use and some behaviors that we might not even be aware of. So a deeper look into the driving forces behind sexual harassment and assault in ETHS, the Chicagoland community, will protect all students in future years. So that's what some students are working on, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Witherspoon.
I just want to highlight that we had a very successful fall open house day, as well as fall parent-teacher conferences. Thank all the family members and parents who came out for that, and encourage them that we still have an open house day survey online till the end of the month, and we always appreciate that feedback so we can continue to reflect and examine how to make that better year after year. For those of you who've already attended YAMO this past weekend, another great YAMO year. And we still have the next couple weekends coming up, and I encourage you that if you have not seen it, be sure you get to YAMO. A special announcement this year that our Educational Foundation is hosting a special event this coming Sunday. It's YAMO's 60th year, and we have returning YAMO participants from the past decades. And they are putting on a benefit show. I think it's going to be just a lot of fun. And we'll even have Tony Award winner Jesse Mueller here as a kind of headliner. But I think that folks will find it really exciting. Again, that's this Sunday afternoon. And it's a benefit to perform, to support the performing arts. Also, we have several fine arts programs coming up in the near future. The Jazz Big Band Concert is October 17th. The Fall Band and Orchestra Concert is on October the 25th. The Freshman Sophomore Play is on November 2nd through the 4th. And the Choir Concert is November 7th. Quite a few opportunities to come out and see our students perform. Also, be sure you mark your calendars. We have our Latino Heritage Festival coming up on Friday, November the 3rd at 7 p.m. It's a free event in the auditorium celebrating Latino music, dance, and culture. I have attended this before. I cannot begin to tell you what a terrific evening it is, and certainly encourage you to get out for the Latino Heritage Festival. And finally, this Wednesday, day after tomorrow, is Wild Kip Futures Day. And it used to be just our assessment day, but we have in the last couple of years, reconfigured it. Each grade level has planned activities that are very pertinent to that grade level. Attendance is taken on that day, and in addition to that, the night before, so that's tomorrow night, October 10th, is an opportunity for parents and guardians to attend a family night with the community builder Calvin Terrell. And the reason Calvin is here is because the next morning he'll be interacting with all of our freshmen as he does every year. I cannot begin to tell you, after you witness how that man can conduct a seminar with an auditorium full of people and have them right in the palm of his hand. Until you see it, you can't imagine the power of it. So families are invited tomorrow night, and then we have Futures Day on Wednesday. And oh yeah, and Wednesday's a half day of school and students are dismissed at noon. And that concludes my report.
Great. All right, thank you, Dr. Witherspoon. All right, so we are at our action items. The first action is approval of resolution ratifying development and affordable housing agreement at 2005 Gray Avenue.
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Second action item is approval of press policy issue number 95.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there a call to question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
I have just two questions for clarity. The IHSA requirement is that a student must be passing 5 classes, right? And that's the recommendation, correct? Yes. But then, so I'm wondering, are we adding to that requirement? Because when I was reading the memo last time we met, it said it should also stipulate that students who do not earn a 2.0 GPA from the previous semester must meet weekly requirements. So are we adding to the IHSA requirement by adding that last sentence?
The IHSA requirement is the recommendation, but in our procedures, we're looking at the 2.0 for the week-to-week eligibility requirement.
Okay, yeah. So that will be part of the,
yes.
the practice. Okay. And then my second question is, when will, if this policy passes tonight, when will it be implemented?
Hopefully by October 23rd.
And will the strategic interventions be prepared and ready and flourishing at the same time of policy implementation?
That's the goal, yeah.
Ooh. Okay. All right. And I think that's it. So for clarity, if the interventions are not ready, will we still move forward?
I don't believe that we will move forward without the interventions, but let me just say they're already in place.
Right?
Yeah.
But then there are some new ones,
and
right?
then there are new ones, and it's just a matter of expanding what we already do. So it's pretty low-hanging fruit on our end,
okay.
But we expect to be ready. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you just, for the purpose for everybody to hear,
sure.
I know we've talked about the interventions. Can you just kind of give us a summary?
Yeah, students are expected to have we're looking at grades weekly.
Yeah.
Coaches, club activity sponsors, looking at how students are doing, if they're a part of our teams in all of these clubs. And if students are failing to meet the requirements, then there was an intervention that's going to be kicked into place from our student services team, counselor, social worker, with the coach, a team, the grade level team, appropriate deans and so forth, and social workers are going to be there to work with the student as well as the teacher, coach, or whatever's necessary to make sure that the students are not falling behind. It's still an academics first recommendation. And so we're going to expand what we already do.
And everybody understands this.
Well,
Coaches.
I hope so. You know, we're still talking. We're still talking about it. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of work on our end because it's ramping up all of our efforts of what we already do. But you know, we're committed to making sure that the students succeed. So it's work that is well worth the effort.
Pat?
So just somewhat of a reflection and kind of pulling some themes together from tonight. You know, we talked during the AP presentation about that cross-fertilization with AVID and how exciting that was. And I had asked Chris Levatino a question about support for the coaches, just what their PD it was around this. And with the discipline report, we were sort of talking about seizing the opportunity to make that connection with every kid. And I guess the reflection is that we need to think about that in this new policy in terms of how are we supporting those coaches to do something a little different than they're doing, and how are we cross-fertilizing, and how are we making sure that we're connecting, using this as an opportunity. So nothing that I'm sure you're not already thinking about, but I really felt like there was a lot of themes throughout tonight's connection of let's make sure everybody's really on board and understands, and let's make sure we're using every contact with a kid as an opportunity to help that kid further.
Yeah.
And so again, I know you're thinking that, but it just...
It's good to point out and say, as I said, that's certainly our goal, and it is, you know, up to me, Mr. Levatino, Ms. Boyd, Mr. Gale, Ms. Kinsey, all of us to make sure that we do this with fidelity across the board, and that's certainly our intent, our focus, and because we don't want students to fail, I mean, you can certainly expect us to be following through with that, you know, the best way that we can.
Thank you.
If I could just comment, the athletic department, Chris called a meeting, or made available a meeting for coaches to come and meet with Dr. Campbell and Dr. Witherspoon last week, one evening, to talk about this. And I took it as an opportunity, because I coach baseball here, to go and, you know, as a board member, to really listen to hear what these coaches had to say about this issue. And it wasn't widely attended. Everybody's really busy, but, you know, some pretty significant coaches were there. Coach Buzz was there. Mike Ellis, basketball, was there. Don Michelin was there. And Fenton Gunter was there, along with Mr. Levatino and Dr. Campbell and Dr. Witherspoon. And I sat and I listened to this conversation, which went on for, I guess, an hour or so, a good hour. And it was lively. And the thing that struck me is that each of those coaches, these are really experienced people, each of them had a different perspective on how this would help their athletes. But none of that focus, no mention was made of, you know, what Chris said, I think he used the term, you know, keeping them eligible. Or, you know, let's win more games because our players will be eligible. That wasn't even in the room, that thought. It was all about, you know, how do we help these kids be successful academically? That was the prize. And they all expressed different perspectives on that in different ways that they thought a different policy would help them accomplish that, right? On the other side of it, though, there was not, and this went on after you two guys left the room, there was not a lot of clarity about exactly how this is going to work, and they're a little worried about that because it's coming up this month, right? So just as a, you know, kind of a heads up, you know, there's some information that needs to be disseminated, but the belief in what we're doing as not any kind of a lowering of our standards or expectations. In fact, on the contrary, this is a way for us to ramp up expectations and simply deliver messages to student athletes and other participants in other activities that failure is not an option. We will not let you fail. That's not going to happen. And early intervention with appropriate supports is sort of the backbone of this whole effort. And I think there's a great deal of consistency with how we've tried to individually support students more and more as time's gone by over these past several years. And it's also very consistent with our long-held belief, I think unanimous belief, that in the data that shows us that participation in extracurriculars leads to better performance. And we certainly saw that from the athletic perspective tonight in just the GPA report. So, you know, I'm enthusiastic about this. The devil will be in the details, as always, right? And how we are able to implement this and how effectively and how quickly we can get those supports online and really intervene on a very personal level, kid by kid, and make sure that kid gets what he needs, that student gets what he or she needs. And the other thing on a larger, more philosophical scale that I really like about this takes away this punishment aspect of, we have our way of doing business, we're the school, and you didn't keep your GPA up, you know, which could be, for a junior, a couple of bad years. Now they are doing better, but they're still not eligible. It's punishment, right? This turns it where it's shared accountability, where the school is recognizing, hey, we're failing this student.
Yeah.
Whatever we're doing, the student isn't succeeding, we're going to hold ourselves accountable for that as an institution as well. Right? Now, yes, it takes the student. You have to have the student being held accountable as well, but the school and the student need to be jointly accountable, and we need to take a position as an institution that failure is not an option. And it's our failure if the kid fails. And that's what I like about this. So we're going to be watching, I certainly will be, very carefully how we implement this and how immediate and personalized those supports are. But I think it's a great idea.
I support the concept. I'm concerned about the outcome. And the intentionality of making sure that we have things in place in order for this to be successful. And I appreciate the coach's enthusiasm of supporting this. But I know without a doubt that there are others outside of coaches who are concerned about what this does and what this feels like and the optics of what it looks like. So that's why, you know, we have to be, I always say intentional, but, you know, that's how I move. And so we have to be very thoughtful in this process, and I also appreciate the many voices that were included up to this point in making sure that people were allowed to be heard and be a part of this process. So I know there was a lot of work and time set aside for those meetings to take place, and it demonstrated a lot of passion and a lot of interest around this. So this is not simple. It may appear simple on paper, but this is not. For some communities, this is not easy, because this is not how we manage our household. So, you know, it does require all the effort that went into it. So I appreciate that, and I am hopeful about the outcome, without a doubt. So.
Thank you. I think that the meetings, the time for discussion was very well served. So I really appreciate that, and I think if we don't have more discussion.
I have one quick question.
Yes, Jude.
Marcus, what would you say, do you feel like you have the buy-in from the teachers on this? Because this is essentially an academic issue, and academics, of course, impacts the student life, and then they have an impact on each other.
I can say speak to the constituents that we did talk to. When Chris Levatino met with the coaches, Nicole Boyd and I met with all of the club and activity sponsors, and just this last week I met with the Black Caucus, and so we're talking about hundreds of folks just right there. And I can say that there was a lot of discussion, some of the same concerns that were brought up here, but amongst those conversations, there was counterpoint amongst the staff itself. And then coming to mostly consensus at the end of the meeting to say students really need to be connected, and we kind of get it, but we need to make sure that there's fidelity with what we're doing. Pretty much the same conversation that's happened here. So with that being said, I mean, if the conversation would have gone any other direction, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with this conversation. But as we discussed and sort of went on and have bits and pieces of data and setting context for around, this is not really just about sports, but pretty much everything here at ETHS, and really talking about how important it is for our students to belong, which is also connected to the comment that you raised tonight about unauthorized presence and what's really going on with kids. Are they connected to school? Having that comprehensive view and conversation was really important for those folks that we talked to. So I would say yes, but there's still we want to make sure that what we do, we're doing it right, and we're not really hurting black males, but we're actually trying to support black males. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes. Okay. Next item is the consent agenda, and that includes approval of bills, personnel agenda, appointments to staff, exempt support staff, safety and nutrition services, change in status, educational stipends, maternity, paternity leave, certified, retirement, certified support staff, resignation, support staff, nutrition services, and release nutrition services.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, old business or new business? Anybody have anything to
I
bring
have
up?
a little bit of new.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I spent the day today at the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance conference, and Marcus was part of a panel presenting at the conference. It was a series of great programs, including a keynote speaker, Alex Gino, who wrote the middle grade book called George, about a transgender student, which I haven't read but sounds really good. I attended a morning program on youth-centered lawyering, legislative advocacy plenary panel, and then the lunchtime, or the post-lunch session rather, Marcus was on a panel, Building Gender-Inclusive School Guidelines. And then the last panel of the day that included some well-known Evanston lawyers, including Juliet Berger-White and Nikki Baser, who is a forensic lawyer, and also was former general counsel of the Illinois State Board of Education, presented on the legal landscape, the paths towards inclusion. There were a number of student and youth panels and programming going on at the same time, so there's a lot of good stuff going on today at that program. It was a lot of fun.
Great. Others? Pat?
Former Alderman Dolores Holmes asked me to ask the board to come to next Wednesday morning, is it the 18th?
The 18th is Wednesday, yep.
Yes. The 18th at Faith Temple Church. Tony Preckwinkle, the Cook County Board President, will be doing a State of the County presentation, and it sounds very interesting. If you're in town and available, it's at doors open at 8:30, and there'll be food served, and then the presentations begin at 9.
Thank you. Jonathan, you had your hand up.
I would like us to discuss the confiscation of the Evanstonian at our next board meeting in open session.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Are we doing that as a motion or by consensus, or how are we addressing that?
You brought it up as an item you'd like us to add to the agenda.
Yes.
So, is that a consensus of the board? Okay.
Where were you proposing we discuss it?
In open session.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
Sorry, it's getting late.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that is a joint meeting.
Well, maybe we could stay a little come a little earlier or stay a little longer.
We'll think about
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
appropriately address that. So one reminder for the board, we have, we can remember the date, we have a retreat Saturday, November 4th, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, and we read the book Despite the Best Intentions over the summer. If you didn't, you still have a month to read it. Because one of the authors, Amanda Lewis, is going to be at our retreat in the afternoon to lead a discussion with us. So I'll send you, I'm meeting with her, so I'll send you information if it's valuable for you to think about some guided questions beforehand. But please make sure you get to that book. I actually need to review it as well. And I'm sure you all have a copy, correct? Yes, and then Barb Tony will be there in the morning to lead us in a closed session. Okay, so it's late, so we're not going to do polling of the board. I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying late. 10:12. I thought it was later.